I'm gonna start. Thank you. So, good morning, everybody. We are very pleased to be in here and to share our insights about e-mental health and especially online healthcare in addiction care. First of all, let me introduce myself. I'm partner of eMentality. eMentality is a consultancy. We provide advice and implementation of digital healthcare to healthcare organizations. And I'm going to tell you more about eMentality later on. For the past 11 years, I've worked as a project leader and advisor to implement e-health in most of the time mental health care organization. And I'm actually a social and organizational psychologist, so not a clinical one, but I am very active in organization to lead digital transformation. And for me, digital transformation is about culture change. It's about your daily behavior to act and to react in your daily life with all the possibilities we are having now with technology. Something more, I'm very fond about appreciative inquiry. I don't know if someone knows appreciative inquiry. It comes from positive psychology. It's about turning negative thoughts or negative experience into success in the future, and it's about sharing each other your stories and knowing the condition you need to aim for success and apply those conditions in your future success. So it's very beautiful approach of changing culture. How to reach me? You can find my contact and of course Joris' contact in our presentation. So for the next 20 minutes, 30 minutes, I like to do this program with you. It's going to be very interactive, so you are all welcome to react. First, before I begin, I like to do some checks about how active are you actually online. And then I'm going to tell you something more about what is e-health exactly. What are we talking about here? And the context and usage, how for you is it possible to apply e-health for your organization or for your jobs and as a clinician or perhaps as a patient? How do you apply digital healthcare? And most importantly, I think, what are the conditions to apply e-health successfully? And something more about eMentality at last. So first, by raising hands, how many of you have experienced online shopping? Great, almost 100% or perhaps 100%. And why do you shop online? Can I get some reactions?
Convenience.
It's convenient, it's easy, and why is it so convenient for you?
You can do it from your desk.
Anytime, any place. Yeah, great.
It's easy to compare products.
Great. You don't need to be at all places, takes your time, so it saves you time to shop online. Nice. Next one, I've got 4 checks. Next one is online banking. How many of you do your online banking? 100%, I guess. Great, so you're all very experienced online and very active online. Yeah, and how do you feel about privacy and the safety about online banking?
Taking a chance.
Taking a chance, so you think, well, maybe there's a risk, but it's so convenient, so I'll do it. Yeah.
It's not only that, it's inconvenient to go back.
Right. So for you, it's very useful to do your banking online.
Yeah, there's less choice so if you go to the bank. Better.
Yeah, great. Next one, social media. Do you have an account, social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Pinterest, anything, Instagram? Yeah, like 100%. Yeah, great, very active, nice. The last one, have you experienced healthcare apps. You can think of Runkeeper or tracking your sleep, Fitbit, tracking your activities. How about that? Almost 100% or maybe 100%. Well, you can as well stand here and tell me and sharing, stories about online healthcare. Great. So when you think that you're all very active online and you use your, possibilities to keep healthy, so how does healthcare nowadays look like? And I'd like to show you a short movie about technology outlook in healthcare in 2025. And remember that 2025 is just, 8 years from now. Let me show you this first. And afterwards, I'm going to ask you how you feel about it.
Technology has always played a central role in healthcare, from diagnosis and treatment to prevention and healthcare management. And by 2025, technology will have empowered, targeted and personalized healthcare. This will deliver medical treatments tailored to patient needs, with the best responses and highest safety margins to ensure better patient care. Technology will support us in making healthier choices, monitoring our health, optimizing exercise, sleep and nutrition patterns, and it will redefine the patient and doctor interaction through self-assessment, coaching and intervention. Wearable sensors will only increase in their capability and will be used to collect information about the physical and chemical properties of our bodies. Genomic technologies will have successfully transferred from research environments into the clinics. The molecular basis for all monogenic rare diseases will have been discovered. Advanced clinical research will be able to link patient records to genomic sequence, and treatment regimens will be more adaptive to the individual patient, resulting in a higher treatment success rate. Additive manufacturing and biotechnology will create opportunities for cellular repairs and prosthetics and production of medical devices that are tailored to a patient's body and lifestyle. As we look beyond 2025, technology will continue to unlock new frontiers and drive personalized, safe, sustainable healthcare.
So I haven't seen this. How do you feel about it? Anyone?
Great sales pitch.
Yeah?
I think it's great. I really believe in it.
Yeah. And do you think it is happening now as well?
Yes.
So, yeah.
I think that will raise the cost of healthcare because we're going to examine ourselves so often and we're going to have a lot of demand for healthcare, I think. And I think that the division in the world will be even more between the rich countries and the poor countries. Because this is only a small part
Can you
of the
speak a
world.
little bit?
Only a small part of the world will have access to these new technologies.
Okay.
To my
So it will raise the cost of healthcare. Just one opinion.
I think the opposite.
Why is that, please?
It will be available, due to the technology, it will be available for everybody, and so the cost will automatically go down. As with communication today, it's only 0.1% of the cost of 50 years ago.
So yeah, at one point it will raise costs. At the other point, it will make it available to more people, and yeah. Anyone else? So what does this mean, and how does this affect your role as a clinician, caregiver? What do you think?
Ultimately, it will reduce the reliance on human capital and rely more on technology capital.
And how do you feel about that? Is that a good thing?
Yes.
Yes, you do?
Well, in behavioral health, I do, because we are woefully under-prepared with qualified need for probably another 100,000 behavioral health care
Yeah.
workers. It's just, I just don't see it happening. So to the degree that this can supplement,
Yeah.
complement that, I think it would be very useful.
So due to lack of professionals, we're gonna need technology to help us. Yeah.
And I think there are probably levels of sophistication in the ability of technology to even diagnose and direct clinic and direct primarily the physicians to clinical pathways for
Yeah.
immediate interventions.
Yeah. It already exists right now.
It already exists.
Dr. Watson, if you have heard about it. Yeah, great, thank you. You, sir.
In terms of the video, it was very much focused on more physical,
Yeah, the medical.
health
Yeah.
situation. So sort of genomics, which is particularly relevant to cancer treatments. Obviously, there were aesthetics in there, gene therapies. All of that is very much focused on what you might call physical health rather than the mental health aspect. So to me, the kind of application of e-health to mental health is kind of lacking in its thinking and its adoption, and needs to kind of get on the train really.
Well, good remarks, because our presentation is all about mental health care and online treatments. So, coming up. Thank you. Well, it is technology, right? You need to perform. Yeah. So what are we talking about? So nice bridge. E-health. According to the World Health Organization, e-health is the use of information and communication technology for health. And when we talk about e-health, it's not only online treatment, maybe you think of that, but it's also about communicating online, also e-services and e-support. I'm going through for a high-over summary for this, and Joris is going to more in detail. Communication, it starts with your website. Your website is providing information for prospects and colleagues, so it is possible to offer a variety of types of communication channels through your website. Next, online treatment. You can think of healthcare apps, and you are experienced with that, but also telehealth. Telehealth, well, you know, in the 60s, there was a radio doctor. Have you heard of it? A radio doctor? Yeah, you're laughing, yeah?
Well, yeah, I remember that.
You remember that, yeah. What do you remember of that? And what do you think of that?
Well, it was fine. I mean, you know, people called in and got advice and foolishly followed it, I think.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But it's one kind of one type of electronic, you know, long distance consult, right? So it's not new what we're doing here. So you know, it exists from the 60s. But telehealth involves long distance consult between a clinician and a patient, and it is possible to monitor, to provide intervention, and it's kind of face to face. It is screen to screen, but you also can see the body language and the expression. And of course, the picture, the image below, it's about collecting your data on one place, like a personal health record. It's a part of online treatment. E-services. E-services content managing your bills online, managing your appointment online. How convenient is it that you know, like online shopping, you can manage your appointment anytime or any place, what suits you. And e-support. This is this website, Patients Like Me. It comes from the United States, and over 1 million users, patients, made use of this. This is about a website, patient supporting each other all around the world. They're sharing their knowledge and their experiences, and you see this, e-support for breast cancer. So most of the time it is used for the more severe or rare diseases. But how wonderful that you can share and you can care and support each other, even that you don't know each other. So why we think e-health is important? You already said is cost saving, you said it's cost raising, but I guess in the basis that everybody you can answer to greater demand of healthcare. So according to World Health Organization, e-health makes universal health coverage achievable. And about big data, when you're using apps, it collects your data, and if it has thousands and thousands data of users, you can predict some future behavior, or you can predict, relapse or something about that. And it's also empowering people because data allows you to make informed decisions. And it is available 24/7, anytime, any place, and is in a way cost saving. So how can we apply e-health in mental health care? In general, addiction care is about these stages: intake, detox, treatment, and aftercare. So in these stages, how do we combine offline and online? I'm going to go quickly. In this, it is possible to do a pre-intake, like an online assessment for your patient, and it's possible to fill out a form about your alcohol use on daily basis. And imagine if you have done this 2 weeks in a row, and you see a graph of yourself developing, your alcohol use, and you can relate your alcohol use to your mood, for example. So have you been drinking a lot? How are you feeling? And when you get all those analysis and you see that, it's insights, knowing what you do and what effects it has on yourself, it really helps you to change your behavior. This one is an example of a sleep tracker. You see the yellow part is the part that you were active, and the blue part is the part that you were asleep, and the red parts, they are the parts that you need to worry about. Perhaps you are willing to sleep, but you cannot get into sleep, and you see a pattern. And also here you can relate that to your activities daily, or your alcohol use, or something like that. And of course, all is collected online, and you can consult that anytime, any place you like. In the intake phase, online appointment and perhaps online consults with your caregiver. And in addiction care, it is important to be able to share your experiences and to collect people you love and you find important to support you during your recovery. So it is possible to share some information with people you find important. During detox, we know that it's very important to take things step by step and to get a good sleep and stay active, physically active. And of course, you can track also your activity, in relation to online. You can put your information in your health records. During treatment, I told you about, I've spoken about health records. It's basically, a platform when you combine all your information together at one place, and where all your data is collected. And I told you earlier about inviting people that are important in your support system to maybe have also insights in your development, so they can support you when you're when you need it. And you can combine, wearables. Have you heard about wearables? Fitbit, yeah. You can also combine them. During aftercare, it is important to go to self-help groups who can support you, and when you're having a hard time, to consult your caregiver, or this e-health makes it possible to get care around the world. Perhaps you're on holidays and you're having a hard time, and you can check your app perhaps and see where's the nearest self-help group that I can go to. How convenient will it be? So one example, Triora. We as eMentality and Carify, we supported Triora for the last 1.5 years to get digital for their private clinic in Spain. This is their clinic in Alicante. And their vision is about being worldwide, being accessible 24/7, digital, and that all their services are integrated. Their vision is about going the extra mile for a meaningful life, and they focuses also not only on the addiction but the holistic approach, mind, body, and soul. How did we support Triora? It started with a website, and this is a website that it's called. There are several points when this call for action. So when you're a visitor on this website, you got several possibilities to get in contact. Is it? Yeah. Okay. Gonna go much more quicker. This is an example of online module, and this is about depression treatment. As you can see, you can fill out your sleep journal, you get tips for getting a good night's sleep, so also psychoeducation. Next one is rational emotive therapy. It's all about CBT, because it is easy to translate CBT step by step into online. And this is how the personal healthcare of Carify look like. Perhaps you can see, but I guess it's too small for you, my record about events, messages, files, and assignment that you've done and you submitted to your clinician. So, in short, I guess, to sum up, we created this model for Triora. In the core is about a meaningful life and to support their patient to live their meaningful life. And it's not only about effective treatment, where e-health is a part of the treatment, so treatment in a modern way, but it's also about fitness and wellness. And according to a website that is accessible. And as a visitor, when you're a prospect, you go to the website and you feel like, I feel very welcome. So hospitality is also very important, not only as a professional staff, but also in your website. And of course, all integrated in a patient process. The conditions, I have 2 slides of conditions. What is important when it's about technology is not only just technology, it's about pretty much management and people challenge. When you see the graphs, 77% lack of having the right skills and competence to implement new technologies. So as an organization, you need to facilitate your people to get acquainted with new technologies. And 55% lack of having the right organizational culture. So it needs to be translated into your daily activities when you get digital. And it's not about substitutes of your activities, but it's more blended, adding some communication online and providing your therapy in a traditional way, but in combination with online. So this is also a complete model as a patient and as a clinician, we think we go through all these points about the perceived usefulness of the tool, usability, also credibility of healthcare providers, and also cost effectiveness in the long term. So what do we do as Immentality? We like to support organization in partnership to get digital, and it starts with a vision and a strategy, and how to translate your strategy to transform really your organization in daily behavior. We love to do that, and I think change is not, Christoph told you earlier about some fear he's experiencing about getting online, but I guess it's not fear of technology, of fear of new things. I guess it's more fear of leaving old habits behind and trying new things. And we believe in an integrated process. So thank you for your attention. I hope you enjoyed. Are there any questions so far before Joris will start his presentation? Yes, please.
I don't see it because when a patient has mental health issues or drugs or alcohol issues, and that person is so distressed, I'm not sure how he's going to manage to make appointments, to go online, to talk to doctors over the computers. So I cannot see that happening.
So when you feel when you feel craving, you're stressed, how does online help you?
No, how can you manage your own health over a computer when you are in a chaos, living in a chaos with a mental health issue, drugs issue?
Yeah.
I don't see that happening. I don't know.
Interesting. I think that's a case study. Kevin?
I'm Kevin. I'm working for Triora, and we see that 85% of the applications we receive is online. So people know how to find us and also know how to seek help. But I do agree with you that it's not for everybody. A certain amount of patients will not be able to make use of this because of their condition. So that's true.
I think with physical health, obviously it's way easier to quantify that, isn't it? You give them this medication, you give them this treatment, you're going to get an outcome. With mental health, there's so many contributing factors like engagement. Like if someone's really that distressed, they're going to log on a computer going, where is it, what is it, do you know? And although it is future friendly, and we still have an aging population, haven't we? And I suppose I wonder how that would work with those people that haven't on your computer to begin with, and now have to sit down and learn it, do it, and then when distressed, remember how to do it.
Yeah. I guess one of the conditions was perceived usefulness of the tool. So when you are older and you have nothing to do with technology, and you're gonna live without technology, e-health will not suit you. I guess so. So it's not 100% suitable for everybody, perhaps. Yeah.
Well, we work with we have a number of technology interventions, and the problem that we encounter is sustainable engagement. So people use these for a period of time, just like every other app, and then it begins to tail off at about the 3-month point. So we're now using one that has an incentive. It actually has you actually earn rewards and gather them, because you have to addict people to these technologies.
Reverse psychology.
Well, on the tube last night, there's a guy, a businessman who's playing a game. He's obviously tired
It's
of the game.
addictive.
So, because we've done work with 5 or 6 different of these, and it's sustaining and keeping the person in. And I think that's it's one thing when you're distressed, but so we use it in continuing long-term care. And that's the challenge that we've had with it. And unless you can create a gamification feature.
Yeah, nice one. Virtual reality, serious gaming, also very useful.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe last one?
I do not agree completely, because I think we will go through, just as your banking, your digital banking app, you're using it daily and it won't go away after 3 months, because it's very useful for you.
It's very convenient, yeah.
The moment the app is something daily and gives you so much easy and feedback,
Yeah.
then probably we'll use it as we use our
Again,
car.
perceived
Yes,
usefulness. Yes.
as we use now
But,
our banking,
That's what we want to get.
yeah.
Yeah. But you know, digital health is quite young. I get it started 20 years ago, but still there are studies of 20 years about effectiveness of online versus offline. But it's, you know, still very young. Yeah. Thank you very much. Floor is yours.
All right. I'm going to use the mic, I think. Sound guy in the back.
Yeah.
It's on?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So thanks so much, Catherine, for the great introduction. I tried to keep the mic right in the place where it should be. I'm Joris Moolenaar. I'm a psychologist, actually clinical psychologist, but I haven't been practicing. I run straight into technology and digital health. So I've been in the industry a couple of years, and we actually built a company in helping healthcare providers or clinics to become digital, and we enable them with a digital platform to do these things. And what interestingly is, if you look at digital health worldwide, there are many, many companies jumping into this sphere. So there are, I think, maybe a couple hundred companies doing digital health for mental health care. What you generally tend to see is that a lot of these tools that are developed don't really fit the current day of business or the care paths you're providing. So they become nice add-ons, but what you see is what we heard today as well, is you set out an app or a tool, and then you see the patients drop out after a couple months. So the compliance is actually quite low. So when we started developing and working on digital health, the first things we did were we were actually working in personality disorder departments, and we started looking at building diaries and trackers. So that's actually how we started beforehand. What we're doing nowadays is that in the Netherlands there has been a big change on this area. We supply 45% of the Dutch market alone, and what we do is we add sort of a digital layer to current care paths. And by doing that, it enables you to do a different type of business, but you can change a couple things along the way. So my goal here today is for you guys to sort of show what you can do with digital health based on experience from a couple of our customers. So you have an idea, what can you do in addiction care with digital health, and what can you achieve with that as well. And what we also know is that the patient is way more time out of your office than he is in your office. So it becomes very interesting if you want to change behavior. You want to be where the patient is in his normal behavior or his environment. And I think that is the difference that digital health is providing you. It's sort of an extension of your clinic. And what we also see is it's maybe difficult for you as a healthcare provider that the time zone or the times that you're working for a patient, those are shifting. If we look at the usage of our platform, we see that normal opening hours were between 9 and 5, for instance, and we now see that people start working at 7 and even up to 10 or 11 o'clock at night. But we also see that a lot of patients start logging into the system at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the night because they can't sleep. And they use the tool to sort of engage and write it off. And that becomes very interesting. So what we try to do is, if you look at transforming behavior, you have to look at technology. And what you try to do is create a sort of integrated approach where you start working on also providing and fixing things that don't go really well in your care paths. It's really interesting. How many of you guys have waiting lists? Are there people here who have waiting lists for patients? How many weeks do you have to wait for the first appointment? A couple weeks, 2, 3 weeks, sometimes. If you look at addiction, sometimes people are really motivated on day one. And if you have to wait a couple of days, there comes a sort of anxiety, sort of stress to come to these first meetings. What if you could change that? If you look at relapse prevention, what if you could reach out long term in a low cost way so you can stay in contact with patients? while they're recovering and starting their life again. And by doing that, if you sort of building your care plans digitally, something interesting happens as well. All the talks you psychologists have in their rooms, you don't really know what they're doing. Everybody follows protocol, sort of 12-step program, but everybody has his own mark on it. But if you start working with the same tools with each other, then something becomes comparable. And by doing that, it also gives you more insight on which things work and which things don't work. And of course, you want to have a personal approach, because that's the biggest risk with digital. Sometimes we think that everybody is the same, but that's not true. So a digital tool should also enable you to personalize more for the individual, because you want to tailor your treatment specifically to that person, because everybody is different. A lot of software developers think that if you can sort of digitalize it, that is the new world, but that's not true. You have to have a system that enables you to sort of engage more differently. So what we try to do as well is, by doing and setting these things up, you create data, collecting, trending settings where you can do great things. And you guys are all from a traditional industry. Everybody is used to doing the talks and doing these things. So why should you go digital? I think because it can do many things. Like Christine was saying today, is that there are like many channels where patients find you. They can call you, you can sign up, and you can all do all these things. But you can do way more with digital health. So you're in a process actually from becoming a paper type office sort of to a more digital office. What you see is that once you become more digital, you get better access to the data you create. And that data is about your patients. And it depends, of course. If you have low volume of patients, the data will not mean so much for you. But if you do high volume treatments for lots of patients, then it becomes very interesting. And by being more digital, you create different ways for patients to be in connection with your office. But you also see that patients are having different views on how they want to be engaged. It's about empowering. Everything we do in our daily life now is on demand. If you order something, you have it the next day. If I want to speak to somebody, it's right there. So why not have that for a psychologist? And if you look at the addiction care you guys are in, it's very specific at the moment. You are already really engaged, you're really available, we can call, you get right somebody on the phone. But if you look at general addiction care in many other clinics, which is not private, there's a big difference. It's quite hard actually to get somebody on the phone. And it takes a while to get help. On the other side, you see that patients are more looking for those kinds of services. So you need faster times to reach out. What you also want is a different relationship. We enabled, for instance, patients with eating disorders to work online. And what we saw is that actually their response rate in keeping eating diaries was higher than they would normally do. And that's because digital also makes some things easier. If it's fun, if it's motivating, if it's rewarding, it will enable you as well to be more focused and work a little bit harder. And that's interesting in changing behavior as well. So it's also about conveniency, it has to be private, and on the other side, everybody wants to feel like an individual. You're special, everybody's special. And you want to give that feeling. And the great thing about digital is that technology actually helps you to make it more personalized. So we're sort of in the business in helping people seeking help. And on the other side, you guys are in the same business as well. So if we look at digital health in practice, it's all about the process or the pathways patients run through the system. You of course have pathways in how you look at treatments. But if you look at the digital pathway, you sort of can lay it on top of your normal treatments, and it becomes something which is not really special. It's actually the things you normally do. So from the moment a patient signs up for treatment, what you can do is sort of supply a digital account. So you have a person who gets a digital account to your clinic. Why should you do that? Well, it's actually very interesting because you enable them to have an extra channel to be in contact with your organization. You could do, for instance, make sure that somebody's available there for quick questions. But generally, you provide a lot of information that's the same. It's about, you come to the clinic, we need to prepare you, you need to bring this, we want to know who your family members are. You have all these important questions, and every time you ask the same thing. But what if you could do that online? It would save you time, it would save you a lot of hassle, but also for the patient it's quite convenient because he can do it from a safe place behind your website. And by doing those little steps, you start getting a different flow in how you interact with your patients. For a patient, of course, it's important to have sort of a place where you feel at home. It has to look like your organization, and you want to help a patient sort of take these steps slowly and gently. And it's about a sort of pace, so you have to provide information in small bits. It's small steps forward. On the other side, you know that in certain situations in treatment, patients differ. So in sign-up, you can be maybe not ready to really engage with the system, but you can do some general things as well. But you are not able to do, for instance, the deeper cognitive behavioral therapy type treatments for your additional depressions, for instance. So what you try to do is tailor the amount of digital health you provide based on where the patient is in his treatment. And by doing that, you can work with self-management or combinational treatment. So with self-management, what systems generally tend to do is that you let the system actually guide the patient to take all these little steps, and you are sort of standing by, monitoring them, and that's it. But if you go into more guided steps, that is where the patient is ready to really interact. He's more stable, he's able to do more at home, and then you can do other things. But if you look at the moment where patients sort of leave the clinic and go home and have relapse prevention, then patients are already ready to engage in a new world because they recovered, they're ready, and they need to get back to work. But you already know what kind of issues he's going to run into. You know what's going to happen with work, with relationships, and all these things will be barriers that you already know are going to happen. What if you have a digital space where somebody can come back and get these services? So for the patient to be working on your mental health, the system also needs to guide you along, but it also has to provide you with the right information. To make a patient change his behavior, you have to work in different ways. You have to work with medical education, psychoeducation. It's about learning things. It has to be graphical. You have to have movies. It has to be fun, because all the websites we experience in daily life are fun. They are pretty, they look nice. And on the other side, you want to enable patients to sort of track yourself. But trackers, for instance, in mood or behavior, are not always logical in every stage of the treatment. So you want to enable a tracker when the patient is at that phase, specifically in your treatment, to let him do that. And on the other side, you want to do some questionnaires, but also maybe do writing exercises or diaries where patients do their own thinking and feedback in learning new skills. And by combining these tools and sort of connecting them to your care paths, you can do great things. But you're all in the business of behavioral change. So how do we know that digital health is working? Because if you add it to your normal treatment processes, it's also important that the technology sort of interacts with how you build up a treatment, but it also has to have an effect, because we can all say, oh, we need to go for gaming, that's fun, that's an enabler, we sort of get addicted to it. But what you do want to know is, if you put out a tracker to a patient, how do you know the tracker is working? How do you know it affects behavioral change? So what we do at Carify is we work with the behavioral interventional technology model. It's the BIT model, and there's a lot of research on that already. And what it actually does is you combine behavioral change strategies, which we all learn in at the university, and you also, and that's connected to specific technology solutions. So it can be a tracker or a mood slider or all those little elements. And what this research does is you connect the two together and you start researching if they have effect. And that all depends on where you provide them in the treatment and with phase. By doing that, in combination with communication, you get a model where you can change behavior more effectively. What's very interesting as well is that once you start becoming more digital, at first, you also don't know what specifically works for your organization. We know, based on research, which elements work based on the research, but you guys provide a specific treatment with a specific vision. So it's really important that you connect the two together. And we started 3 years ago in the Netherlands by doing this, and now we have more than 450 providers who have a digital entry to their clinics. Some people do it really simple, other people go really far. And this small map here on the right side, that is the Netherlands, where you can sort of see where everybody's using e-health all over the country. 7 years ago when I started with digital health, everybody was laughing about it. They say, this ain't gonna happen, we're not gonna become digital. But now all the big clinics are using this to sort of find new ways in engaging with their patients. And by using these models in the research we're doing, we're figuring out better and better which things work and which things don't work. For the clinician, of course, it's really interesting if you let a patient do all these steps and the system is recording that information. Then you can say, okay, we have these behavioral, the bit model, little technology pieces, and they influence behavior. That's based on research, and by that way we can influence behavior. But that's not enough, because you guys are the professional, and you need to interact at certain points as well, because you have the experience and you know where the risks are. So if you have a patient walking a certain pathway, and you're able to sort of monitor and look into that information the patient is providing, you're also able to interact at that specific moment. You can send a message, or a safe text message, or you can give direct feedback to a specific exercise you provided. And by doing that, you're also able to interact at the moment a patient fills something in. Of course, you all have working hours, and you have to take that into account. But you can make, you sort of negotiate with the patient how you want to work together. So you can say, okay, I'm open between these hours, but we know that this is a risky period for you, so anywhere, anytime, we're ready for you, so I'll be standing by. On the other side, we also see that by doing this, if a patient goes on holiday or he's going somewhere else, he's always able to work on his treatment. That's a great thing. So we see logins from all over the world, from all the little islands. And a couple years ago, if you went on a holiday as a patient in the Netherlands, your treatment stopped. That was it. And then you came back from your holidays and you start working on your depression treatment again. Of course, that's only able if you're not, it depends on where the patient is, of course. For a clinician, it's important that you have different tools available, because your strategies will change. It's not always self-management, it's not always communicating, and by enabling you to have certain choices, you can do different things. So I'm going to give you now a few examples of what customers do in addiction care. So these are all big customers who use the product. And this is, for instance, a company in the Netherlands. They have, I think, a revenue of 250 million euros a year. They do depressions, addiction, anxiety, all types of treatments. And what they discovered is that there are a lot of GPs in the Netherlands. You have GPs here as well in the UK. These GPs have patients who have maybe light forms of addiction. Sometimes they have patients with more severe forms, but they all function. So what the clinic said is, hey, we're actually the expert. We know how you can treat an addiction really good. So what if we provide a product where psychologists who work for the GPs are enabled with our information, a treatment online, to sort of support their recovery or initiate problems so they can sort of assess if they need more care afterwards. So what these guys started doing is that by providing simple and lighter treatment programs online in combination with a few meetings, which are way less costly than a normal treatment, they were able to be there in the time of need where patients are figuring out if they have an addiction problem, yes or no. And for a GP, it was also very comfortable, because they can sort of refer to the psychologist who said, well, we're going to figure out if you have a problem. So the relationship with the GP and the patient stayed sort of neutral on that, because it's a sensitive subject. By doing that, you of course need direct entry, because you have to make it simple. So you have a direct sign up where you can start ready, and then you start in a digital program that is self-management. So you're guided as a patient to do all these little steps, and at step 10 or 11, that's the moment you meet each other in the office and have a talk about what you achieved up to that moment. So what do you get? That's of course a big question. It's about, first you start with a welcome, like if we meet each other. So you see a movie of the clinician you're going to meet in a couple weeks. So you always say, hi, I'm your psychologist, we're going to meet in 2 weeks' time. But before we have that meeting, I would like you to fill in some information about yourself. I definitely want to know your support networks, but I'm also going to ask you a few questions about what are your treatment goals? What do you want to achieve yourself? It's really important that you know that as well, because you have your goals as a clinician, but it's also about the patient. So the patient fills in that information, comes to the first visit, and then you can do the rest. So it's about mapping your life, talking about your problems, and maybe set a few goals. Of course, these goals are way more simpler than the goals you're going to set up later on in treatment. But by doing this, you are better interacting with your patient. And self-management is a great tool because the delivery of self-management is actually low-cost healthcare, because the creation of these programs is not really expensive anymore, and you're able to reach way more people. In addiction care, we have a customer in the Netherlands. They reach about 300,000 patients a year that do the online assessment and the self-management course. And that's actually a great generator as well for leads for the rest of the treatment. Are there questions so far on this part of the self-management? Okay. Then I will go on for the next step, because this is sort of the low-level entry into the self-management. What's really important as well is that if you provide self-management, it has to be fun. Self-management is way more difficult than guided therapy with the digital element, because self-management is sort of you have to enable a person to keep motivated, and motivation is of course a difficult business. So these programs are mainly tuned to be not so extensive, not too long, and it's a sort of condensed period where you have to do a lot of things, but then you have to exit or you go to the next level. Because we cannot expect somebody to keep monitoring his drinking habits for maybe a year long. That wouldn't be smart. So, but by doing that, you also have to take into account that it's fun to do. So here you see, for instance, the goal bars. This is what your personal goal is. So you set your personal drinking goal in number of drinks. And here you can see every day what you achieved. So it's simple, it's easy, you fill it in on your mobile phone, that is where you are. But it's not enough, because now we have your personal goal, we have the things you did, but it's also about the location. But that's where technology comes in. You can map the location every time you fill in your measurements about what you're drinking. And that's important, because sometimes you have a certain route that you walk and you're connected to that bar. That's how it goes. Or to that party or those friends. And digital enables you actually to see that pattern. And sometimes, when I talk about digital health, it's about sort of looking at a cup of coffee or a cup of water. If we look at it from your side and my side, we have two perspectives. What digital health actually does, it gives you a sort of perspective around it. And that is where it becomes, for me, very interesting. So by reaching out where the patient is, you can do mobile and online things. But we also know that the plan you set out and the reality the patient is walking through always differs. And that's a tough thing to do. So in self-management, you also have to be critical about the reason why you offer it and what you want to achieve. So the program has to be developed for a certain purpose. So you can use it, for instance, to create more reach, or to help people find the right care, or maybe help people drink maybe a glass alcohol less, but also select the patients who really need severe care, so you can interact and call them and get them on board. So there are drawbacks, because it's not for everybody. You have to be able to assess the information. Your IQ has to be at the right level. If you have an IQ below 80, this becomes very difficult. It's too extensive. And on the other side, what you also need to think of is you have to have a safety net for those who don't fit the program. There is nothing more frustrating for a person to start on a big step actually to sort, maybe I have a problem, and then figuring out that the program doesn't fit you and you drop out. That's actually not good. You don't want that. So you also have to have digital support system on hand where you have a coach or somebody who is available to ask quick questions, but also refer you to the right place if it doesn't fit you. And those things we also do digitally. So as Catherine said, we also do the intakes and diagnostics. We had a personality disorder customer. They do 2,000 patients a month or something. And these guys said, we have an intake where we assess the personality disorders. And what we tend to do is we have a one-day intake, so we have a lot of talks with these patients. We do all the measurements, but what we're actually doing is we're doing a whole battery of assessments and tests. But if we are honest to ourselves and we look at how we do this, we actually think that some patients are overdiagnosed. If we do too much tests in that day, we can do it maybe 60-70% of the patients could do it with half of the tests, and we're able to sort of assess which products really fit them and which don't. So we started looking at that process, and we digitalized part of that online of that intake and diagnostics. And we were able to reduce the time spent per patient with 30 minutes by doing that. That's a great benefit. And the great thing is also that the patients who signed up, they started on the day they signed up. And then they still came in for the day. But what the test did, if we saw the patients were more severe, they get the full day, and the other ones get the half day. But we had the information in advance before they came. So how great is that? So it's a direct solution where you use digital health to create a different type of intake. And of course, if your patient is really not able to do it, you have to keep the line open for somebody to not use digital as well. So about 10% or 15% of the patients still uses the old route, but for the rest, we achieved this result. The result for the clinic was that they needed less staff to do all the intakes. So I think this is an interesting area as well. And if you look at the effects that are achieved on this place, is that what you see is that even the clinicians like it because they have the right information and they're already better prepared for the first meeting as well. So it saves them time as well. So the conversation you have the first time you see the patient, you already have more information about the goals and things that want to be achieved. But also a lot of psychologists said to us, I'm always telling the same story. And it takes 15 minutes of my first session. And it's not the most interesting information. I want to talk more about the person. Time-wise it's okay. Let's go into the treatments. This is the Jellinek Clinic. This is also one of our customers. 55 million in revenue, 2,000 staff, and I don't think they do 18,000 patients, by the way, but it's 6,000 or 7,000. Interestingly, what these guys did, they came to us and they said, okay, we do the 12-step treatment program. We do, based on a sort of Minnesota model, of course. They also have aftercare pods. But if they looked at the treatments, they have in-bed patients, of course, the detox. But they say, we have a lot of ambulatory care. But every patient that comes in, we give the same route. But they said, we probably figured out that that's not necessary. If you look at a McDonald's, for instance, it's maybe not the best example, but they have a light, medium, and heavy menu. So normally what they did, they had 10 sessions or 20 sessions, a number of minutes, and every patient got the same number of minutes and sessions. But when they started looking at their patients, they said, hey, this patient actually probably doesn't need the full 10 sessions. Could it be possible actually to do it maybe in 6 sessions and do the rest online? That was actually the question where we started. So we started trying out and seeing if we could change the number of sessions you had face-to-face with an addition of digital and still achieve the same result and effect on helping the patient recover. What turned out is that the effect was the same with the patient. So we created a menu where you had 3 choices. So once the patient was diagnosed, he was admitted to the clinic, he had his detox, then the treatment started. And the psychologist was able to choose, do you want the light, medium, or heavy menu? So the psychologist, in conversation with the patient, decided which route to take. Generally, what's the funny thing is that most clinicians, I think 80%, all chose the middle route, so the medium menu. That was actually the most chosen menu. It was 2 sessions less than they would normally do, but it still had the same information and digital interaction online with it as well. This worked so well that they started with a small team, and then they started teaching it to more psychologists, and now they do 60% of all their patients in this combinational way. And it's for the company as well. It gives them way more insight in the things that work in the treatment than the things that don't work in the treatment. So because every patient fills in all these little steps, they know where patients fall out of the treatment, where they stay in the treatment. And we started looking at, for instance, data out of 2013 that were 1,000 patients who were in the test panel at that time. And we started looking at online behavior and could it predict dropout during the treatment that was coming. And based on the data and the dropout information, we were able to assess it with 81% certainty that the patient would drop out, because we already knew how your digital behavior was before you started the rest. And it's still early we're still researching the claims, and we have to work on the models, of course, because we're not in the business now to sort of take over your jobs. It's really important that you guys assess. You do it way more better than we do. But imagine that you have this information about your clinic. It's going to enable you to do different things. And it's early, it's still developing, but it's really interesting. We also did the digital intakes. Their dropouts were reduced with 20% as well in the first session week. So that's quite an achievement, I think. What these guys also doing is they're also buying up other clinics in the Netherlands. And what they do is then they go to these clinics, which are the old way of doing, like non-digital companies. And they come in and say, hey, we have a model, how we work. And they bring the model to that clinic, and all the staff members are trained to use it in that way. And everybody starts working in that type of treatment. It becomes measurable, and they're able to also work on the quality of their treatments. They even have a research department who works on the modeling. And every year they upgrade their treatment. So if you create a digital care pattern and a treatment, it's not done. It's not like you think of it and you never have to work on it. You have to work on it every year. And that's where it becomes important. Look at the data, look at what's happening, talk to your patients, talk to the people who work with it, and start upgrading yourself. And that is how the digital world is growing so fast. It's about upgrading, changing, improving. And that's something you guys are doing on a general basis as well, with all the education you get and all the new things that are available. So these new care delivery models help you to do all these little steps, from online sign-up to quick access, digital strategies, and you are able to reach out to patients in way more areas than you expected. Relapse prevention is also an interesting area. We developed a program for relapse for anorexic patients. And what we did is they had a relapse prevention program that were group sessions. I think it was 3 or 4 group sessions after the anorexic treatment. What they discovered was that a lot of patients still dropped out or had relapse effects. So we started thinking of a digital strategy where you had a self-management program that prepared the group meetings, but also provided sort of homework afterwards with small trackers and a quick communication channel to psychologists who could receive questions. And that was somebody they knew. So after the treatment, they were set in an online environment, still had a few group sessions, and by doing that, we were able to reduce the relapse with 70%. So they had a relapse of 40%, and we brought it back with 70%. So that was really interesting. And the great thing is that the program actually is cheaper to provide, because the staff members actually need less hours to provide it. And to create such a relapse program sounds very complicated, but the technology we created is so flexible, you can adjust it accordingly. And we did it in 4 weeks' time. So it was just 4 weeks, 200 hours, and that was it. And we had a new relapse prevention program. But we did it with professionals and patients. That is the clue. So you cannot think of it just from the office. So we employ a lot of psychologists in our company, but we always work with psychologists. But we also have many available treatments that you can use straight away. Interestingly, also, if you look at aftercare and relapse prevention, we do it for multiple disorders, from anxiety to addiction. And there's a wide range of treatments available nowadays that you can use and assess. And if you have comorbidity, for instance, sometimes people have like a light depression in combination with their addiction. but it's not so severe that you really have to go deep into it. That's a moment where you can use self-management. If it's more severe, you can add a second treatment as well. So you can also provide multiple digital care paths from one system. And then family members. Of course, the family is important as well, because somebody who is addicted has a support network, but also the family has to cope with what's happening to the family member of the loved one. So what we also did is do people know, probably you know the CRAFT program, the CRAFT treatment. And it's a community reinforcement and family training module where you help the family members of addicted persons. This is provided as a service to patients and their family straight from the website of the healthcare provider. So this generates, it achieves actually two things. The first thing it does is you have family members who use the program because they want to have their loved one into care. So they actually follow the online program to self-assess and sort of help their loved one to get in. And on the other side, it helps family members who are attached to the system because a patient signs up and they're invited there as well. And that's also a sort of low-cost delivery of serviceable programs where you can enable family members to also help and work together. So I think this is a very interesting area as well. So if you look at all the digital service you can add as a provider, there are way more things you can do to do great things. What's also happening is that all these virtual clinics that we're creating, they're creating sort of, this is actually, we come from the Netherlands, this is where my office looks from, it's Utrecht. And what we're doing is we're creating all these clinics and they become a sort of digital layer on top of the physical world. And that's interesting for a patient as well, because the patient is able to share his personal information or maybe his diary or his life story with the next provider. And you see a lot of patients who go in care, but it stays with them a long time in their life. But they never lose that information. And how great is it that you don't have to tell your life stories twice? So that is what we're doing in the Netherlands as well. We're building a digital network on top of the physical world. And these are a few examples. And we have private practices who use it nowadays, and also the larger clinics. And what you see, of course, is that larger clinics use it for way more options because they are able to provide that kind of service, while a private practice generally tends to do is communication and some lighter treatments, or depending on what they offer. And we created about 700 virtual clinics in the last 3 years. So it's quite interesting if you look at Google and see all these things back. The growth of digital health is also changing. We started a couple years ago and we had to fight, we had to work, it was a new idea and people weren't adopting as quickly as we expected. But the last 3 years of Carify, people are adopting. We do 35,000 patients a month, they grow at 11%, and so every month we have new patients online. And every provider that signs up is providing new patients as well. And interestingly, based on the current rate of growth, we will reach, there are 1.3 million patients who get mental health care in the Netherlands. Based on our current rate of growth, we'll reach about 10 to 25% in the next 2 years. So it's really interesting. It's actually, digital health is sort of applicable for any clinic. I don't think that if you don't have, probably many of you work with some tools, don't have a digital strategy yet, but it's really interesting to sort of ask yourself the question. Think 10 years ahead or 5 years ahead. What kind of clinic do you want to be? What kind of services do you want to provide? And which helps your business? Because you're still in a business. You're in business in helping people, but you also have to go with the digital flow. And you have to be where your patient is. So it's interesting to start looking in what are the areas you want to improve to reach out. And it's not so complicated as it sometimes seems. So to summarize, digital health is a great tool, but it's not the solution for every problem you are having. So you should see it as supplementary. Add it to the things you want to change, add it to the things you can improve, but also add some extra services to reach more people. And by doing that, you can do great things. And yeah, we as a company keep on updating, changing, learning, improving the bid model and improving the elements within the system to change behavior from our side. And we provide you guys with the data and the information to do great things. So that's sort of the things are happening now, and that's what we did for Triora and eMentality together to help companies take these steps. So are there any questions so far? Because
Does Dutch health insurance pay for this?
they pay for the minutes you spend on a patient. So and they also so if you have a video call, you get reimbursement for that. It's a little bit less than you would normally get with a normal meeting, but you can treat more patients with the same number of staff.
Insurance company demanded from the healthcare
As well. Yeah, the last 2 years, even the insurance companies are demanding you have a digital entry or digital strategy. It's still, they're really, how do you say, gentle. It's not so, they want to try it out, but what you see is they are looking for ways. We have the same problem as you guys. Not enough, too many patients, not enough people. So we have to look at solutions how we can offer more care for more people. So, and we have customers in Spain, of course, Belgium, Denmark. We started working in the UK and the US, and it's an interesting time because the technology a couple years ago was way too expensive to invest in or get it. Nowadays, this technology has become so accessible that you can take it from the cloud, set up your digital practice. It will take you a couple of hours, and that's it. That's a whole different ball game than a couple of years ago. Any other questions?
How you manage medication online if somebody needs medication?
Yeah. Medication, how do you manage that?
Yeah.
What we did, for instance, with psychotic disorders, it's really important to keep track of the medicines, but also how the patient is feeling. So what you do is you create a specific tracker for that purpose, and you work with the patient together, and he fills in the tracker maybe 3 times a day, depending on how you set it up. And the psychiatric advisor or the doctor is actually watching, and so you can work together in adjusting the milligrams. And that works. Yeah.
Yes, just like to play devil's advocate for a second, if I may.
Yeah.
The technology boom and the internet is a double-edged sword.
Mm-hmm.
I work in the field of helping specifically male sex acts.
Mm-hmm.
And of course one of the huge problems which is proliferating out of control is online addiction to pornography and worse. So if you have people who are struggling with using the internet for all the wrong reasons,
Yeah.
have you had experience of encouraging the same people to try and link with psychologists through an online medium, which is going to be a challenge in the first place?
Yeah, we do actually also forensic care. So you have patients who are criminals. There's of course a group of criminals who cannot be online. So what we tend to do in these situations is only provided when they're in the phase of so they had the treatment and they're ready to get back to life. So it's safer to provide it then because the temptations are way too big at first. So we do not have much experience on that side. So that's where we stand.
So would it be right to assume that most of your addiction patients are kind of more in the traditional
cocaine, alcohol,
so
smoking.
Right. So this is not really, well, no, at the moment you can't help specifically with the more behaviourally oriented addictions.
Well, we do those, but if you look at specifically digital, like online porn, that's something we do not do yet. But
sometimes we adjust the router.
okay.
To eliminate other addresses.
Yeah.
So we do the games as well.
Okay, so for gaming as well, yeah, and you can if in psychiatric forensic care, what we also have is it's sometimes built on a closed system, like you said. So you don't enable the rest of the internet to be opened. So you when people are in house, you sort of lock them down, but it can only be done if people are committed.
I think the principle is fantastic, but I just
Thanks.
think there are times when it's going to have limitations.
Definitely, and it's also we also have anxiety patients who have fear of going out. So we started providing the program for them. It was treatment support, education, and a few diaries. There were 2 extra effects that we didn't expect, and there was the first effect was that people started telling more, but we also had people staying in the treatments that normally wouldn't stay in the treatment, but they didn't come out of the house. So, but those were the patients that wouldn't have come to the office. So it was a sort of also a double-edged sword. On the other side, we reached more people, but we actually wanted to get those people out of the houses. So, any other questions so far? So, did we make you guys a little bit more enthusiastic about digital health?
How do the professionals react? And what are their experiences so far with your tool?
Yeah, professionals is a good question. How do they react to these things? There are a couple of effects. Most professionals are under high pressure. They have to work hours, minutes. You have to be on. You have to make the time. So by adding new things, it's always it's change, and like Catherine was talking about, that change is tough. But what you also see is that the engagement is changing, and it gives you more fun to engage. So we see also the people who are open to it and adopt it, they actually tend to like it, and it becomes more fun because you are more in control. It's if you look at most clinical systems that you now have in the office, it's about registration, it's writing down things, it's not the most fun thing, it's administration. These things are way more built on the things you normally do anyways. So we see the adoption of change getting easier than it was a couple of years ago. And 3 years ago, we went to healthcare providers and psychologists, and we had like inspirational sessions, and we started talking about digital and making them enthusiastic about it. And now we actually have them calling us. And sometimes you see a lot of psychologists who work in your clinics, but also have a private practice, and they start opening up digital health spaces as well. So they also use the tools now for their own practices. So that's changing really rapidly.
We've had some difficulty with that. Clinicians, very difficult to become engaged with this. I think with some of the pro forma things that you do through registration and some of the early administratively required things, that's fine, but we have had some trouble getting it integrated into the clinical process.
Yeah.
Part of it is because it's just another thing, and part of it is, I think, is some concern that there may be some intent down the line. It's very hard to get them to understand that if you can use this to reduce your face-to-face sessions by 20%, you actually are able then to provide access for more people because you have more time. But the way clinicians get paid in our systems, you see someone, you get paid.
Yep.
If you come every 2 weeks, you're a good thing.
Yeah.
Why am I going to give you up and take on you, and you may not show up? So
yeah.
It's slow. The younger folks are a little bit better with it.
It's true, and that's why you have to look at the whole process. You really have to embed it, and you have to become sort of a digital more type company. And
well, we made a mistake, because I think this is great. I love it. We're going to do it. That doesn't always fly down the line.
Exactly. And that is typical, the curve of adoption. So if you look at the Gartner hypercycle, for instance, it's probably a known graph. What you see is first the early adopters and then the rest. What we do see is that the industry is, because I told you before, there were many companies are jumping into the mental health care digital space, but a lot of these tools really don't work or interact. But you also see a few companies that are making the leap, and these companies actually grow bigger. So they employ more people, they start growing more rapidly, and what you see is that the products also improve. So the technology is improving so rapidly as well that it becomes easier and better to implement. And nowadays, if we have a single practice, they get an online webinar for an hour, and they're set up, and we see these small clinics, they do 20 patients a month generally, and these guys start rolling, and it works. A few years ago, we did a training for a day, so it totally differs then.
Can you say a bit more about how you can join up different providers?
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously, healthcare systems, certainly you can. GPs, there are certain clinics there. There are lots of different ways of accessing the health system. So I'm interested in how talk about the digital there, but in practical terms, how's that really working for you?
Actually pretty well, because even small practices can open up shop, and it's not expensive anymore. So it's a small step to take. So you can, if you look at the chain of light to medium or severe care, you see more providers coming online. And generally, if somebody works in a network, you can bring your own network sort of online and work together. So the patient can share the information across the steps he needs to take. And there actually are some clinics who use it strategically as well. So they started developing treatment projects where they train actually psychologists to apply the product in all those levels. So it becomes a business model on its own. So they rent out their psychologists to GPs, and in that case they are able to provide the care. And because they are partly digital, it's more efficient.
Does the patient basically choose to share their information with another provider?
Yeah, yeah, and interestingly, what you also get is that the people who are working on a patient, generally you work with a couple of people on one patient. So you all work together on the same information, but every text message you get, every email, every step in the treatment is viewable by the staff that is working on that specific patient. So you always have a 360 view of the information the patient is providing, and your colleagues as well. And that becomes very interesting if you have a chain of care. All right. Well, I think we're there. Thanks so much for your time and attention.